As I look around, I see great events playing out on the world stage. The global democratic recession continues. People don't really understand the dignity of individual citizens or the joy of liberty. The space race heats up. More and more countries are wanting to land up on the moon. Artificial intelligence, with its promise and peril, threatens to take over industries. Then we have the endless wars between countries, Russia and Ukraine, Hamas and Israel, United States and China, the civil war in Sudan, and not forgetting our old friend COVID, which comes up with newer variants every time we think it has been eradicated. The advanced world today has an unprecedented ability to communicate ideas and beliefs to any part of the world and to any person in the world. These world-shaping events are so important. I am reminded of two things. First, I am reminded that no event in the history has shaped the world like the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And second, I am reminded of this simple fact about life. Life does not go on forever. There is death. Every one of us must face death. There is no military victory, no medical cure, no global village that can prepare any individual to answer the ultimate question in life. And today, I stand before you to proclaim hope, the hope of His resurrection. There is death, yes, but life is in Jesus Christ, the hope of our resurrection. Friends, on Easter Day, we have a sense of anticipation and longing. There are sobering questions on your mind, and much hangs in the balance. Is there hope? Is there new life? Is there reason for joy? The answer to all your questions has arrived this day. It is here waiting for you. It is a three-word message. Christ is risen. Good news for the depressed. Good news for those who have lost loved ones. Good news. Good news to those who have lost their joy. Christ is risen. Consider with me today the implications of Easter. First, there was a transformation of the disciples. The most telling evidence of the resurrection is not the empty tomb, but the transformation of the disciples. Their disappointment changed into euphoria and joy. Their fear changed to an evangelical boldness. They assumed a new audacity. In less than 2 months, they went from cowardly disciples who locked themselves behind closed doors for fear of the Jewish authorities to courageous apostles who stood before the thousands in the presence of the Jewish authorities proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. Some years ago, a youth visited me. After the initial greetings and general talk, he suddenly asked me a theological question. "What do you think of the resurrection?" he asked. I replied, "I believe that it happened in reality and not just in the minds of people." "What is your evidence?" he asked, like a professor. I said, "The disciples." 12 men are not going to give up their lives to simply perpetuate a lie or that which they know to be a hoax. "I don't know," he mumbled. "I just don't know." There was his problem. He was seeking knowledge, not faith. You do not say, "Resurrected Christ appeared to me and then I will believe." It is just the opposite. The resurrected Christ appeared only to those who did believe. The angel told the disciples, "Go to Judea and there you will find him." I would suggest that Judea represents the community of believers. Judea was to be the place where Jesus would plainly reveal to his followers that he was indeed alive. He did not reveal himself to the Caiaphas and Pilates and Herods of the world. But it is not as though the resurrection is without sound evidence. Over the years, 6 arguments have been made. Consider them with me. First, the story appears to be historical and not metaphorical. The disciples could never have simply believed in the resurrection of Jesus without it being true. For a first century Jew, the idea that a man might be raised from the dead while his body remained in the tomb was simply a contradiction in terms. On the night before and on the day of his crucifixion, the disciples, out of fear, left Jesus and denied they even knew him. Some even went back to their old businesses, but they returned to being his disciples. Why? Only the resurrection would have given them the conviction to get back together. They lost their businesses, their reputations, their families, their personal well-being, and even their lives for their testimony that they ate and drank with Jesus after he rose from the dead. Other than the resurrection itself, can you think of another reasonable explanation for why they would make this claim? Second, the tomb was discovered empty by women. Women occupied a low rung on the Jewish social ladder, and the testimony of women was regarded as worthless. If the disciples wanted to create a more believable story, they would have had men discovering the tomb first. The evidence is that they told the story as it actually happened. Third, Paul's testimony supports the fact of the empty tomb. Paul was a respected Jew, but he claims he encountered the risen Christ. I should add here that Paul does not have in mind a spiritual or metaphorical death and rebirth. He wrote in his letters, he was buried and he was raised. So other than the resurrection itself, what reasonable explanation can you think of that would cause an important, influential, intelligent man like Saul of Tarsus to change his beliefs and jeopardize his life and his freedom? The empty tomb story is part of the church's tradition before the Gospels were even written. It is therefore very old. The story is simple and lacks legendary development. Likewise, archaeology over the years has overwhelmingly proved the historical accuracy of the Gospels. If you need proof or evidence, this is what can be offered. After this, it is a matter of faith. But this was enough for the disciples. It changed their lives. Secondly, because of the resurrection, our view of death has changed. A group of teenagers came in a car to the graveyard. They had loud music going on in the car. It looked as if they were having a great time. They reached the graveyard. The music stopped. They stood around the grave of their friend who died and were crying bitterly, embracing one another. I cannot help but think how that first Easter was different. The women came in sorrow and left in joy. The youth came joyfully but went away sad. You see, because of Easter, your whole view of death has forever changed. The resurrection is the absolute bedrock of faith. Take it away and you no longer have a church. As Paul said to the Corinthians, if Christ has not been raised from the dead, then your faith is in vain and our preaching is in vain. Not only that, we have been found to be misrepresenting God, for we testified about God that He raised Christ from the dead. Even nature seems to want to scream out the loud news of resurrection. That which was dead, a seed, which fell into the earth and rotted, is alive again. Nature does not know extinction. It only knows transformation. If God applies that principle to the least of His creation, doesn't it make sense that he also applies it to the zenith of his creation, the human beings? Because of the resurrection, our view of Jesus has changed. It is interesting that a story ends as it began. At the birth of Jesus, the angel's message to the shepherds is, "Be not afraid." When Mary comes to the tomb on that first Easter Sunday, the message is, "Be not afraid." We have come a full circle. Because of the resurrection, our whole understanding of God is different. Why? Because our understanding of Jesus is different. The one on the cross and the one who rose from the dead is none other than God incarnate. Because of the resurrection, we see the disciples differently. We see death differently. We see Jesus differently. Do not despair. The message that you have been waiting for has arrived this day. It is a 3-word message. Christ is risen. Alleluia. May Jesus Christ be praised.